Thank you very much again, Mr. Secretary, for illuminating us with that explanation. I'll turn to Senator Van Hollen, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. And I know you've just returned back from London, I believe, where you're engaged in the trade negotiations. And I've been trying to keep up with reports as to where those stand. I just have one question regarding that, and that's a headline here that reads that Trump eyeing easing U.S. chip export restrictions to secure Chinese rare earths. I think all of us recognize the vulnerability the United States has with respect to rare earths. It's something that China has decided to limit much more since this trade war got launched in the most recent iteration. But many of us have been very concerned about the diffusion of very high-end chip technology and AI technology to China. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that.
Yes, sir. To the Senator Van Hollen, to the extent that article makes it seem as though there is some quid pro quo, there is not. We have done an extensive analysis within Treasury, Commerce, and all the technology, the White House Office of Science and Technology, on any technology transfer. And we have been very judicious in that. So there is no quid pro quo in terms of chips for rare earths.
Okay, I'm listening carefully, and I understand you're saying there's no quid pro quo. I take it to mean from that there's, you're not saying that we won't increase the access to China of our highest end chip technology. I'm not saying you're saying we are. I'm just asking you haven't ruled that out. Is that, am I interpreting you right?
What I'm saying, there's no intent. You're referring to NVIDIA chips mostly.
I'm referring to NVIDIA chips and the other high-end chips and the manufacturing equipment to produce those chips.
Yes, but in fact, we have done just the opposite. We put export controls on the NVIDIA H20, which I would regard as a very upper-end chip, but not the highest-end chip. So if anything, we have set a...
No, I appreciate the measures some have taken. I would argue building, in some cases, on the Biden administration, but this is why this caught my eye. I just returned from the Senate floor where I have been raising very deep concerns about the deal that was done with the UAE, where on the day before the president left on his trip, rolled back the safeguards that had been put in place by the previous administration, which with, I should add, strong bipartisan support, including the bipartisan joint committee in the House looking into China. So this is an area I think many of us are very concerned about, which is why this headline caught my eye. If I could turn to the cuts to the IRS, and I've followed your comments about how you're able to continue to bring in revenues despite the changes that have been made. I would suggest, Mr. Secretary, that it's way too early to tell. First of all, as you know, a lot of people were fired as probationary employees only to have to be brought back on an emergency basis for tax filing season. So I think it's important we understand that. And the idea that people can really turn around a ship and implement all these new technology and AI changes to expedite IRS collections, especially from very wealthy people, is something many of us have been pushing for many years. But the notion that this has happened in a very short time, I think, defies logic. So are you predicting that the changes that you've made this year will not result in the IRS collecting less revenue, especially from higher end individuals than would be predicted this year? Obviously, if the economy continues to grow, revenues grow. But I'm saying, I'm sure you've seen the CBO projections. The CBO says when you make these cuts, you will bring in less revenue from very wealthy people than you otherwise would. Do you agree with that analysis?
I don't, because I could tell you a couple of things. In discussing with my personal tax advisors, that they say that anyone you could bring in with 2 to 3 years of training is virtually worthless. I would say it is like putting me on a basketball court with Steph Curry. We have, from a whistleblower in Atlanta, and this was before I arrived, under Secretary Yellen, there was a problem with the rapid pace of hiring to the quality of individuals hired. If there were two criteria, two high criteria, many only satisfied one, and then there were a few examples of people who were not qualified at all.
I appreciate that. I would just emphasize again, it'd be helpful if your team could get back to me and members of the committee as to what specific assumptions, premises, and conclusions in the CBO report you disagree with. Can you provide us with that?
Yes, sir.
Because I'd like to, the CBO is like our umpire here. They really don't wear a party hat. They call it as they see it. And in this case, we're seeing very different projections that have very meaningful consequences for our deficit. So I'd appreciate that.
Yep, and what I would point out, in our technology innovation, the IRS technology stack update began in 1990. I believe $50 billion has been spent. We were due to spend $3.5 billion this year. We have cut that back because so much of it is wasted, or it's just patches on existing systems. And also, as I've said repeatedly, I have 3 goals: collections, privacy, and customer service. And I believe we can enhance all of those, as you clearly are well-versed in AI. And I think that we are at the dawn of being able to greatly increase individual and experienced auditor productivity via AI. So for the upper-end tax collector auditors that you brought up, that is what would be considered a plum job. It is something that takes many years of experience. So our goal is to actually be able to enhance their productivity and collections ability with AI.
Thank you. I look forward to getting the analysis that looks at what the CBO has done and where you disagree. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.